My name is Sophia, and I am 31 years old. I am standing outside the house that was supposed to be my forever home. In one hand, I hold divorce papers. In the other, my phone shows an empty bank account notification. My husband Brandon made sure I left with absolutely nothing. But in my coat pocket, there is a tarnished bronze card my father gave me when I was 6 years old. He died 25 years ago in an accident. I kept this card as my only connection to him. Today, with nowhere else to turn, I decide to see if it means anything. What happens next destroys everything my husband planned. Before I tell you what the banker said when he saw that card, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from today. And if you love stories about unexpected justice, hit that subscribe button. Because this story proved that sometimes the people who try to destroy you end up destroying themselves. Now let me take you back to where it all began. My earliest memories are filled with the warm Texas sun and the sound of my father's voice. I grew up in Houston in a modest brick house on a quiet street lined with oak trees. My father, Marcus Webb, was a petroleum engineer who worked on offshore oil rigs. To me, he was a giant with the gentlest hands and a laugh that could fill any room with joy. I remember waiting by the window every time he came home from his trips. He would scoop me up in his arms, spin me around, and call me his sunshine girl. Every single time he returned, he brought me seashells from the ocean. He would sit on my bed at night and tell me stories about the creatures that lived beneath the waves, about the storms he weathered, about the stars that guided ships home. Those stories were my favorite part of childhood. When I was 6 years old, everything changed forever. I remember that day like it was yesterday, even though 25 years have passed. It was a Tuesday morning in October. The sky was gray and the leaves were just starting to turn. I was eating cereal at the kitchen table when the doorbell rang. My mother went to answer it, and I heard voices I did not recognize. Then I heard a sound I will never forget. My mother screamed. It was not a scream of surprise or frustration. It was a scream of absolute devastation, the kind that comes from a place so deep it tears your soul apart. Men in dark suits stood in our doorway. They were from the oil company. There had been an accident on the platform. An explosion. 11 workers died that day, including my father. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and crying strangers. I did not understand why my daddy was in that wooden box. I did not understand why he would not wake up and spin me around anymore. I kept asking my mother when he was coming back. She never answered. She just cried and held me so tight it hurt. After my father died, my mother Diane changed completely. She became withdrawn, bitter, like someone had sucked all the warmth out of her. She removed every photo of my father from the walls. She packed away his belongings into boxes and shoved them into the attic. When I asked about him, she would snap at me or start crying. I learned very quickly that asking about Daddy made Mommy upset. So I stopped asking. But I kept one thing secretly, one precious thing that no one knew about. A few weeks before he died, my father sat me down in my bedroom. He looked different that day. Thinner, tired, but he still smiled at me with those warm brown eyes. He handed me a small envelope and told me to open it. Inside was a bronze-colored card with strange numbers on it. I did not understand what it was. I thought maybe it was a game, a special toy just for us. He said to me, "Sophia, this is your golden ticket, princess. Keep it safe until you need magic. Promise me you will hide it somewhere only you know. Do not tell anyone about it, not even your mother." I promised him. I did not understand why, but I promised. 2 weeks later, he was gone. I hid that card in my music box, the one that played a lullaby when you opened the lid. It was the only place my mother never looked. And for 25 years, that card stayed there, my secret connection to the father I barely remembered. 2 years after my father died, my mother remarried. His name was Gerald Hartman, and he was an accountant. She met at a grief support group. At first, Gerald seemed kind enough. He bought me toys, took us on trips, smiled a lot. My mother seemed happy again, and I thought maybe things would be okay. But slowly, Gerald's true nature began to emerge. He was obsessive about money. He gave my mother a strict allowance and questioned every purchase she made. He talked constantly about investments and financial planning, and he started asking me strange questions. Did your daddy leave you anything special, Sophia? Any papers or cards from before? Something about the way he asked made my skin crawl. Even at 8 years old, I sensed danger in his words. So I lied. I told him no, nothing. Daddy did not leave me anything. I do not know why I protected that secret so fiercely. Maybe some part of me remembered my father's words. Do not tell anyone. Whatever the reason, I kept that bronze card hidden, and Gerald never knew it existed. As the years passed, Gerald's behavior grew worse. He became verbally abusive toward my mother. I would lie in bed at night and hear them screaming at each other through the walls. He was always yelling about money, about what we were owed, about how things should have been different. I never understood what he meant, but the anger in his voice terrified me. When I was 16, I found something that made my blood run cold. Gerald was at work and my mother was at the grocery store. I was home alone, bored, looking for something to do. I decided to snoop around Gerald's home office. I do not know what I was expecting to find, maybe just proof that he was as awful as I suspected. What I found was so much worse. In a locked drawer that I managed to open with a bobby pin, I discovered a folder full of documents. Letters from lawyers, papers marked confidential, and one phrase that appeared over and over again: Webb Family Trust. My heart started racing. Webb was my father's last name. My last name. I saw other words I did not fully understand. Pinnacle Private Wealth. Trustee notifications. Access denied. There were notes in Gerald's handwriting, calculations, plans. Before I could read more, I heard the garage door open. Gerald was home early. I shoved everything back in the drawer, closed it as best I could, and ran to my room. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely breathe. That night at dinner, Gerald looked at me differently. His eyes were suspicious, calculating. I do not know if he noticed something was off, but he said to me in a cold voice, "You know, Sophia, some things in this house are private. Do not ever go through my things. Do you understand?" I nodded, too scared to speak. I never went in his office again, but I never forgot what I saw. Webb Family Trust. Those words stayed with me even as I did not understand what they meant. I escaped as soon as I could. At 18, I left for the University of Texas in Austin. I chose a school far enough from Houston that I would not have to see Gerald regularly. I studied hospitality management because I dreamed of one day opening my own restaurant. It was a simple dream, a quiet dream, but it was mine. I worked part-time jobs throughout college. Waitressing, retail, whatever paid the bills. I kept my distance from my mother and Gerald, only visiting on holidays when I absolutely had to. My mother seemed sad about this, but she never stood up to Gerald, never protected me from his coldness. Eventually, I stopped expecting her to. After graduation, I got a job at an upscale hotel in Dallas. It was not my dream job, but it was a start. I was finally independent, finally building a life of my own. I had a small apartment, a modest salary, and freedom. That was enough. Then I met Brandon Mercer, and everything I had built started to crumble. I was 24 years old when Brandon walked into my life. He attended a networking event at the hotel where I worked, and from the moment I saw him, I was captivated. He was 32, tall, confident, with the kind of presence that made everyone in the room turn and look. He wore tailored suits and drove an expensive car. He was a real estate developer, successful, ambitious, the kind of man I thought only existed in movies. He pursued me relentlessly. Flowers delivered to my workplace every week. Dinner reservations at restaurants I could never afford on my own. Weekend getaways to places I had only seen in magazines. He made me feel special, chosen, like I was the only woman in the world who mattered. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags I ignored. But when you grow up feeling invisible, when you spend your childhood being told you are not important, attention feels like love. And Brandon gave me so much attention. After 8 months of dating, he proposed with a 3-carat diamond ring. I said yes without hesitation. I thought I had finally found my happily ever after. There was one thing that struck me as strange, but I pushed it aside at the time. Gerald was unusually happy about my engagement. He came to Dallas for the announcement dinner, shook Brandon's hand like they were old friends, and said, "Finally something good in this family." After that, Gerald and Brandon became oddly close. They would go on golf trips together, have business dinners, speak in hushed tones when they thought I was not listening. I convinced myself it was nice that they got along. I told myself I was lucky that my future husband and my stepfather were bonding. I was so naive. Our wedding was beautiful, paid for entirely by Brandon. My mother cried happy tears. Gerald smiled his cold smile, and I walked down the aisle believing I was starting a new chapter filled with love and security. The first year of marriage felt like a dream. We lived in Brandon's luxury townhouse in an upscale Dallas neighborhood. 4 bedrooms, designer furniture, a pool in the backyard. It was more house than I had ever imagined living in. Brandon suggested I quit my job. "Why work when I provide everything you need?" he said. "You should focus on making our home beautiful." I hesitated at first. I valued my independence, my career, even if it was modest. But Brandon was persuasive. He talked about starting a family soon, about how I should rest and prepare for motherhood. It seemed romantic at the time. So I quit. That was my first mistake. Without my job, I had no income of my own. Brandon controlled all our finances. The house was in his name, the cars were in his name, the bank accounts were in his name. He gave me a credit card linked to his account, but he monitored every purchase I made. "Just want to make sure we are on budget, babe," he would say when I questioned it. I felt uncomfortable, but I did not want to seem ungrateful. He provided such a nice life. Who was I to complain? The second year of marriage, I started asking about having children. Brandon always had an excuse. "Business is complicated right now. The market is unstable. Let us wait until things settle down." The third year, I found the prenuptial agreement I had signed before our wedding. I had not read it carefully at the time. I was so in love, so trusting. Reading it then, I realized it gave me nothing if the marriage ended. Nothing at all. I confronted Brandon about it. "This seems unfair," I said. "What if something happens?" His response chilled me to the bone. "You came into this marriage with nothing, Sophia. What did you expect?" That comment stung deeply, but I let it go. I was already in too deep. I had no job, no savings, no independence. Where would I go? The fourth year. The marriage felt hollow. Brandon was increasingly distant. Long business trips, late nights at meetings, weekends away with clients. I suspected something was wrong, but I had no proof. Throughout all 4 years, Gerald remained strangely involved in our lives. He visited Dallas every few months, always finding reasons to have private conversations with Brandon behind closed doors. Once I stood outside Brandon's study and pressed my ear to the wood. I caught fragments of their conversation. "The trust requires her signature," Gerald said. "We need her to go to the bank herself. It is the only way to access it." My blood turned to ice. I remembered the documents I found in Gerald's office when I was 16. Webb Family Trust. This could not be a coincidence. I confronted Brandon that night. "What were you and Gerald talking about?" His face flickered with something. Fear, maybe. Or anger. Then he smiled and said, "Just investment stuff. Gerald wants my advice on his portfolio. You know how he is about money." I did not believe him, but I had no evidence. So I started paying closer attention. I found papers in Brandon's desk one afternoon while he was at work. Research on something called Webb Family Holdings. Lists of assets that made my head spin. Oil rights property in Louisiana, stock certificates. And at the top of every page, my father's name. Marcus Webb. My hands trembled as I photographed every document with my phone. There was an inheritance I never knew about. My father had left something behind, and somehow Brandon and Gerald knew about it. They had known all along. Suddenly, everything made terrible sense. Gerald married my mother to get close to the inheritance. When that did not work, he found Brandon. Brandon married me. The romance, the proposal, the beautiful wedding. All of it was a strategy, a long game designed to get their hands on my father's money. But why had they not accessed it yet? What were they waiting for? I needed more information, and I found it in the most unexpected way. In our 5th year of marriage, I received an anonymous text message one evening. The words on my screen made my heart stop. Your husband is not who you think. Check room 412 at the Ritz tonight. I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it to pretend I never saw it. But I had been pretending for too long. I needed to know the truth. I drove to the Ritz that night, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I found room 412 and knocked on the door, expecting to find Brandon with another woman. I was prepared for an affair. I was not prepared for what I actually discovered. A woman opened the door. She was in her mid-30s, beautiful, well-dressed. Her name was Nicole, and she was not hostile or defensive. She was apologetic. Please come in, she said. There is something you need to know. Nicole had been Brandon's girlfriend for 3 years, the entire duration of my marriage. He told her he was waiting to finalize his divorce. She only recently discovered that Brandon was still actively married. When she found out, she started investigating. What she uncovered destroyed everything I thought I knew about my life. Nicole worked in IT and had skills I did not. She obtained email exchanges between Brandon and Gerald that dated back 7 years, before Brandon ever met me, before he ever walked into that hotel networking event. The emails laid out the entire conspiracy in black and white. Gerald had discovered that my father, Marcus Webb, left an enormous trust fund in my name. The trust was structured so that only I could access it. Only me in person with proper identification. Gerald spent years trying to break into it through legal means. He forged documents, hired lawyers, even tried to have me declared mentally incompetent when I was a teenager. Nothing worked. So he recruited Brandon. The plan was simple. Brandon would marry me, gain my trust, convince me to visit the bank and access the trust fund. Then, through the marriage and eventually divorce, they would find a way to take the money. The recent emails showed their growing frustration. She will not go to the bank, Brandon wrote. She does not even know it exists. We need to push harder, Gerald replied. Maybe we should just divorce her and try another legal angle. I sat in that hotel room, reading email after email, watching my entire marriage crumble into dust. Every romantic gesture, every sweet word, every promise of forever. All lies. Brandon never loved me. He was playing a role following a script written by my stepfather. Nicole apologized again before I left. I thought you should know, she said. He is planning to divorce you soon. I could not let him get away with this. I thanked her, though I barely remember driving home. I sat in the parking lot of my own house for 2 hours, unable to go inside, unable to face the man who had been deceiving me for 5 years. But I made a decision that night. I would not confront Brandon. Not yet. If I showed my hand, they would change tactics. They would find another way to get to the trust. Better to let them think they won. Better to plan my next move carefully. I just needed time. I did not get enough time. 1 week after my meeting with Nicole, Brandon came home from what he called a business trip. His expression was different, colder, more resolved. He sat me down in the living room and delivered the words I knew were coming. We need to talk. This is not working anymore. He handed me divorce papers that had already been prepared by his lawyer. The signature lines were flagged with little yellow stickers. He expected me to sign right there, right then. Why, I asked, keeping my voice steady. What happened? I met someone else, he said. She makes me happy in ways you never could. I knew he meant Nicole. Or maybe he had already moved on to someone new. It did not matter. The affair was just his excuse. The real reason was the trust fund. They had given up on getting me to the bank. They were cutting their losses and trying a different approach. I want you out of the house by the end of the week, Brandon continued. You can take your personal belongings. Nothing else. I forced myself to ask the question even though I already knew the answer. Where am I supposed to go? I have nothing. Brandon shrugged, and his indifference cut deeper than any insult. Not my problem. You signed the prenup. You get nothing. That was the deal. But I held my tongue. Let him think he won. Let him believe I was exactly what he always thought I was. Stupid, helpless, worthless. I spent that week pretending to be devastated while actually preparing. I photographed more documents. I gathered evidence. I transferred the few $100s in my personal savings account to a separate place. It was not much, $342 total. But it was mine. Brandon canceled my credit card the day after he asked for the divorce. He changed the locks on his home office. He watched me like a hawk, making sure I did not take anything he considered his. On moving day, he supervised my packing personally. That was a gift from me, so it stays, he said about almost everything I touched. In the end, I was allowed to keep only the clothes I brought into the marriage and a few personal items from my childhood. Everything I had accumulated over 5 years of being his wife belonged to him, according to Brandon. The only car in my name was my old Nissan from before the marriage. It had over 100,000 miles on it and a questionable transmission, but it was mine. As I loaded my 2 suitcases into the trunk, Brandon delivered one final insult. You could have had everything if you were not so useless. I gave you 5 years, and you could not even give me what I needed. I knew exactly what he needed, access to my trust fund. But I said nothing. I just closed the trunk and got in the car. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Gerald's vehicle was parked down the street. He had come to watch my humiliation. Both men stood there, probably congratulating themselves on finally getting rid of me. What they did not know was that I still had the bronze card. And now, after everything I had learned, I finally understood what it might mean. That night, I found the cheapest motel I could on the outskirts of Dallas. $60 a night. I could afford 5 nights, maybe 6 if I skipped meals. After that, I had no idea what I would do. The room smelled like mildew and despair. The bedspread had stains I did not want to examine too closely. But I was too exhausted to care. I sat on that stiff mattress, stared at the water stains on the ceiling, and finally let myself fall apart. I cried for hours. For the marriage I thought I had. For the 5 years I wasted on a man who saw me as nothing more than a means to an end. For my father who died before I could really know him. For my mother who chose Gerald over protecting her own daughter. When the tears finally stopped, I reached into my purse and pulled out the bronze card. I had not looked at it closely in years. It had just been there, a constant presence in my wallet, my secret talisman. But now I examined it carefully. The words, Pinnacle Private Wealth, were engraved on the front in elegant script. On the back there was an account number and a name. Marcus J. Webb. Legacy account. My father's name. My father's legacy. I thought about everything I had discovered in the past week. The Webb family trust. The documents in Brandon's desk. The conspiracy between him and Gerald. Whatever my father left behind was significant enough that 2 men spent over a decade trying to steal it. Tomorrow, I would find out exactly what it was. I fell asleep that night, clutching the card to my chest like a child holding a beloved toy. It was the only thing connecting me to a father I barely remembered. And somehow I knew it was about to change everything. The next morning I woke before dawn. I showered in the questionable motel bathroom, trying not to think about what might be growing in the grout. I put on the nicest outfit I had kept from the divorce. Black slacks, a cream-colored blouse, sensible heels. I wanted to look presentable, not desperate. I brushed my hair until it shined and applied minimal makeup to hide the evidence of my crying. Then I got in my old Nissan and drove downtown. Pinnacle Private Wealth was not listed in the regular business directories. I only found it by searching the exact name on the card. The address led me to a sleek glass tower in the financial district. There was no obvious signage on the building, no indication of what kind of business operated inside. Just a marble lobby, a security desk, and an atmosphere of hushed wealth. I approached the security guard, trying to project confidence I did not feel. "I am here to access an account," I said, my voice only slightly trembling. The guard looked me up and down. My outfit was professional but clearly not expensive. My shoes were scuffed. My purse was a practical canvas bag, not a designer label. Everything about me screamed that I did not belong here. "Do you have an appointment?" he asked skeptically. "No. But I have this." I handed him the bronze card. The guard's expression changed instantly. His skepticism vanished, replaced by something I could not quite identify. Respect, maybe? Or alarm. "Please have a seat," he said. "Someone will be with you immediately." He picked up his phone and spoke in urgent, hushed tones. I caught fragments. "Legacy account. Web. Yes, I am certain." I sat in one of the leather chairs in the lobby, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. What had my father left behind? Why was a simple card causing such a reaction? Within 3 minutes, the elevator doors opened, and a distinguished man emerged. He was in his 60s with silver hair and an impeccably tailored suit. He walked directly toward me with purposeful strides, his face composed but his eyes bright with emotion. He stopped in front of me and studied my face for a long moment. I had the strange sensation that he was seeing someone else, a ghost superimposed over my features. "Ms. Webb," he said finally. His voice was thick with something. Grief, maybe. Or relief. "How do you know my name?" I asked. "Because I have been waiting 25 years to meet you." He extended his hand. "My name is Theodore Ashworth. I was your father's financial advisor and close friend. Please come with me. We have much to discuss." The elevator rose smoothly to the top floor. Theodore stood beside me in silence, occasionally glancing my way with that same emotional expression. I wanted to ask questions, demand answers, but something about the gravity of the moment made me wait. The doors opened to reveal an elegant office suite. Mahogany furniture, oil paintings on the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows, with a view of the entire Dallas skyline. This was not a regular bank. This was something else entirely. And then I saw it. A portrait hanging on the wall stopped me in my tracks. It showed a man in his 30s, healthy and vibrant, with warm brown eyes and a familiar smile. A brass plate beneath the frame read, "Marcus J. Webb, founding partner, 1962 to 1997. My knees nearly buckled. Theodore steadied me with a gentle hand on my elbow. "Your father insisted on that portrait," he said softly. "He wanted to watch over the company he helped build." I reached out and touched the frame, tears streaming down my face. This man in the painting was my father. Not the faded memory I carried, not the ghost who lived only in fragments. A real person. A successful person. A founding partner of whatever this place was. Theodore led me to a corner office and gestured for me to sit in a leather chair. He offered me water, tissues, time to compose myself. I accepted all 3. Then he began to tell me the truth about Marcus Webb. "Your father was not just a petroleum engineer," Theodore said. "He was one of the most brilliant minds the industry has ever seen. He held multiple patents on drilling technology that revolutionized offshore oil extraction. At 28 years old, he founded Webb Energy Solutions. By the time he was 35, the company was worth over $120 million. I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. That is impossible. We lived in a normal house. My mother worked. We were regular people. Theodore smiled sadly. Your father believed strongly in modest living. He did not want wealth to define his life or corrupt his family. He put 90% of his earnings into trusts and investments, planning to reveal everything to you and your mother when the time was right. He paused, his expression growing heavier. Then the accident happened. The explosion on the oil platform was not entirely accidental, Sophia. There was evidence of industrial sabotage. A competitor wanted your father's patents badly enough to cause that disaster. The investigation was buried under years of corporate legal battles. Justice was never served. I thought of my father dying in fire and water thousands of miles from home. I thought of the men who might have murdered him walking free. My hands clenched into fists. After Marcus died, I became the executor of his estate, Theodore continued. He left very specific instructions for you. Everything was placed in an irrevocable trust. Only you could access it, only in person, only with that card. No one else under any circumstances. He turned his computer screen toward me. This is your father's legacy, Sophia. This is what he left for you. I looked at the numbers on the screen and felt the world tilt sideways. Webb Energy Solutions was sold after his death. The proceeds placed in trust totaled $47 million. But that was just the beginning. There were royalty rights from his patents still generating income 25 years later. Annual royalty income of approximately $3.2 million. There were real estate holdings in Louisiana, Texas, and Colorado. Property portfolio worth $18 million. There were stock investments managed carefully for a quarter century. Current portfolio value of $31 million. Theodore waited as I struggled to comprehend. The total estate value is approximately $96 million, he said quietly. It is all yours. Every penny. Your father made certain of that. I started laughing, then crying, then both at the same time. I could not stop. The absurdity of it was too much. Yesterday I was in a $60 motel room with $300 to my name. Today, I was worth more money than I could comprehend in a lifetime. Theodore handed me another tissue. There is one more thing, he said. Your father left you a letter. It has been sealed in our vault for 25 years, waiting for this day. He retrieved an envelope from the office safe. My name was written on the front in faded ink. For my Sophia, my sunshine girl. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Birthday cards, notes in my lunchbox, scribbles on the backs of photographs. My father's hand. Would you like me to leave? Theodore asked. To give you privacy. I nodded, unable to speak. He stepped out and closed the door softly behind him. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and unfolded the yellowed pages inside. My dearest sunshine girl, my father wrote. If you are reading this, then you found the courage to use your golden ticket. I always knew you would, princess. I am writing this from my hospital bed. The doctors say I might not make it through surgery. I hope they are wrong, but if they are right, I need you to know some things. First, I love you more than words can hold. You are the best thing I ever created, far more valuable than any company or patent. Second, I never told your mother about the money. She was not good with finances, and I worried she would spend it before you could benefit. I planned to tell her everything when you turned 18. I am sorry I will not be there to explain. Third, I left everything to you. Not to your mother, not to anyone else. Only you. There will be people who try to take it from you. They cannot succeed unless you let them. Fourth, the world will try to make you feel small. Do not believe it. You come from strength, you come from love, you come from me. Nothing can take that away. Use this money to build a beautiful life, sunshine girl. Help others when you can. And remember that your daddy loved you every single day of his life and will love you for eternity. All my heart, Daddy. I read the letter 3 times. By the end, I was sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. 25 years of grief came pouring out. Every question I was never allowed to ask. Every memory I was forced to bury. Every lie I was told about the father who loved me more than anything. My mother told me he was a failure who left us with nothing. The truth was the opposite. He was a success who left me everything. He planned for my future even knowing he would not be there to see it. I clutched the letter to my chest and let myself mourn properly for the first time in my life. When Theodore returned 30 minutes later, I had composed myself as much as possible. What do I need to do, I asked, to access everything, to claim what is mine? Theodore smiled, and I could see pride in his eyes. Your father would be so proud of you, he said. Let us get started. The next several days passed in a blur of paperwork, meetings, and revelations. Theodore connected me with Pinnacle's legal team. The lead attorney was a woman named Margaret Sullivan, a 55-year-old former federal prosecutor with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She reviewed my situation with brisk efficiency. "So let me understand," Margaret said during our first meeting. "Your stepfather and your ex-husband conspired for years to gain access to your trust fund. They manipulated you, controlled you, and ultimately discarded you when their plan failed." "That is correct," I said. Margaret smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator who has spotted vulnerable prey. "This is a clear case of conspiracy to commit fraud. Wire fraud, attempted identity theft, possibly RICO violations. We have more than enough to pursue criminal charges." She pulled up a file on her computer. Theodore had been tracking Gerald's attempts to breach the trust for over 2 decades. The documentation was extensive. "Your stepfather tried everything," Margaret continued. "He attempted to have you declared mentally incompetent when you were 15. He forged your signature on trust documents when you were 20. He even filed a false death certificate when you were 19, claiming you had died so he could inherit as your closest living relative." I felt sick. Gerald had been trying to steal from me to erase me since I was a child, and my mother either did not know or did not care. "We caught every attempt," Theodore added. "The trust was specifically designed to be impenetrable. Your father anticipated that there might be people who would try to take advantage of his daughter." "Even my mother," I said softly. Theodore hesitated before answering. "Marcus loved Diane, but he knew her weaknesses. He worried she would either spend the money recklessly or fall prey to someone who wanted it for themselves. He wanted to protect you from both possibilities." "He was right," I said. "About everything." Over the following week, I activated my accounts, received new cards, and began to access my inheritance. Theodore arranged for me to stay at a luxury hotel in Dallas while the legal matters were sorted out. The presidential suite at the Rosewood Mansion on Turtle Creek was larger than the entire townhouse I had shared with Brandon. "That is too much," I protested when I saw the room. Theodore just smiled. "Ms. Webb, you could buy this hotel if you wanted. Let yourself be comfortable while we handle things." I ordered room service that first night. Steak wine, chocolate cake. I sat by the window overlooking the city lights and marveled at how quickly life could change. 1 week ago, I was crying in a motel room. Now I was eating gourmet food in a penthouse suite. But the most valuable thing I had gained was not money. It was truth. The truth about my father, about my worth, about my own strength. And I was not finished yet. I called Margaret the next morning. "I want to pursue criminal charges against Gerald and Brandon," I said. "I want them to face consequences for what they did." Margaret's voice held approval. "I was hoping you would say that. I have already started building the case." The investigation moved faster than I expected. Margaret's team of forensic accountants dug into Gerald's finances and discovered that his crimes extended far beyond the trust fund scheme. He had been embezzling from his accounting clients for years, using the stolen money to fund his various attempts to break into my inheritance. Brandon's situation was even worse. His real estate development company was essentially a Ponzi scheme. He promised investors returns he could never deliver using new money to pay off old debts. The house of cards was already starting to collapse when he divorced me. My trust fund was supposed to be his escape plan, the influx of cash that would save him from ruin. Without it, he was doomed. Margaret coordinated with federal authorities. Within 6 weeks, both men were arrested. Gerald was taken into custody at 7 a.m, still in his bathrobe. Federal agents descended on his home with warrants for fraud, wire fraud, and attempted theft. His computer was seized, his bank records subpoenaed. The evidence against him was overwhelming. His arrest made local news in Houston. The headlines were satisfying to read. "Accountant arrested in 20-year fraud scheme." His reputation, built over decades of careful facade, was destroyed overnight. His second wife, who apparently had no idea about his criminal activities, filed for divorce immediately. Gerald called me from jail. I do not know how he got my new number, but I answered anyway. I was curious what he would say. "You ruined me," he snarled through the phone. "After everything I did for you." I almost laughed. "Everything you did for me. You manipulated my entire life. You married my mother to steal from me. You recruited Brandon to marry me. You tried to have me declared dead. Everything you did was to me, not for me. That money should have been your mother's," Gerald snapped. "She suffered while Marcus built his fortune." "My mother chose to marry you," I replied calmly. "That was her suffering, and my father's money was always mine. He made sure of that." "Goodbye, Gerald. Enjoy prison." I hung up and blocked his number. I never spoke to him again. Brandon's downfall was equally spectacular. His real estate company was investigated by the SEC once Margaret's team shared the evidence of fraud. His assets were frozen, his properties seized, his investors furious. He was arrested at his country club. Perp walked across the golf course in his polo shirt and khakis, while his wealthy friends watched in shock. The news coverage was extensive. Real estate developer arrested in connection with trust fraud scheme. Everything Brandon had worked for, everything he had tried to steal from me, crumbled to dust. His lawyer eventually arranged a meeting. Brandon wanted to talk to me, apparently. I agreed more out of curiosity than anything else. We met at Margaret's office with lawyers present on both sides. Brandon looked terrible. Orange jumpsuit, unshaven face, dark circles under his eyes. The confident, polished man I had married was gone, replaced by something desperate and small. "Sophia, please," he begged. "You have to help me. I never meant to hurt you. Gerald pressured me into everything. I actually cared about you in my way. In your way," I repeated. "You planned to steal from me before we ever met. Every moment of our marriage was a lie. You do not get to rewrite history now that you are caught." "I can give you information," Brandon said desperately. "About Gerald's other schemes. There are other people involved. I can name them." I stood up. "Tell that to the prosecutor. I am done with you." As I walked toward the door, Brandon called out one last time. "Sophia, wait. Where did the money come from? You had nothing." I made sure of it. I paused at the door and looked back at him. His confusion was genuine. He truly did not understand how his perfectly constructed plan had fallen apart. "I had a father who loved me," I said simply. "Something you would never understand." I walked out without looking back. Brandon's pleas echoed behind me, but I did not stop. I did not need to. With Gerald and Brandon facing justice, I turned my attention to something I had lost. Family. Theodore helped me locate my father's relatives. For 25 years, I had believed I had no one. My mother told me my father's family wanted nothing to do with us, that they blamed her for his death, that they were cruel people best forgotten. More lies. My father had a mother named Eleanor Webb, now 87 years old, living in New Orleans. He had a younger brother named Robert, now 62, and a sister named Patricia, now 58. There were cousins, nieces, nephews, an entire family tree I never knew existed. They had tried desperately to maintain contact after my father died. My mother refused every attempt. She changed phone numbers, moved without leaving forwarding addresses, threatened legal action when they persisted. Eventually, they had to accept that reaching me was impossible. But they never stopped hoping. My first meeting with the Webb family was in New Orleans. I flew there on a bright Saturday morning, nervous and hopeful in equal measure. Theodore had arranged everything, reaching out to Robert Webb first to explain the situation. Eleanor's home was a beautiful old mansion in the Garden District, the kind of house that whispers of history and old money. As my car pulled up, I saw people gathered on the front porch. A lot of people. My father's entire surviving family had come to meet me. I walked up the path on shaking legs, surrounded by strangers who were crying. An elderly woman pushed through the crowd and reached for my face with wrinkled, gentle hands. "You have Marcus's eyes," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "My boy's eyes. I have been waiting 25 years to hold you." Grandmother Eleanor pulled me into her arms, and I felt something break open inside me. All the years of isolation, of being told I was unwanted, of believing I had no one. None of it was true. I had always been loved. I just did not know it. Uncle Robert was next, a tall man with my father's build and warm handshake. He showed me photo albums that afternoon. Pictures of my father as a child, as a teenager, as a young man. Pictures of my parents' small wedding ceremony. Pictures of my father holding me in the hospital the day I was born, tears of joy on his face. "He called me the day you were born," Robert said. "He told me you were the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He said he finally understood what life was for." Aunt Patricia cooked dinner that night. Gumbo jambalaya bread pudding. Recipes passed down through generations. The whole family gathered around a massive dining table, everyone talking over each other, laughing, sharing stories about my father. I learned that Marcus was known for his generosity. He funded scholarships for underprivileged students, built a community center in the South Boston neighborhood, where our family originally came from, quietly helped anyone who needed it. I learned that my mother never fit in with the Webb family. She resented their closeness, their success, their way of doing things. She isolated my father from them long before he died. I learned that they had hired private investigators twice trying to find me. Both times my mother had moved, covering her tracks. And I learned that despite everything, they never gave up hope that I would find my way back to them. As I sat at that table, surrounded by aunts, uncles, and cousins, I felt something I had not felt since I was 6 years old. I felt like I belonged somewhere. I had found my family. 1 year has passed since I walked into Pinnacle Private Wealth with nothing but a bronze card and desperate hope. My life is unrecognizable now, but not because of the money. The $96 million gave me freedom and security, yes. But what truly transformed me was the truth. The truth about my father's love. The truth about my own worth. The truth about the family that had been waiting for me all along. I live in New Orleans now, in a restored Victorian home in the Garden District. I bought it 6 months ago and spent weeks choosing every detail of the renovation. The house has 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, and a garden full of flowers that bloom year-round. But my favorite feature is that it is only 3 blocks from Grandmother Eleanor's mansion. I can walk there in 5 minutes. We have dinner together every Sunday. She tells me stories about my father, about the mischief he got into as a boy, about how proud he would be of the woman I have become. Sometimes we just sit together in comfortable silence, 2 women who lost 25 years but are grateful for whatever time remains. I also pursued my dream. The dream I had before Brandon convinced me to give up everything for him. I opened a restaurant. I named it Sunshine Kitchen after the nickname my father gave me. The concept is Southern comfort food with Texas influences, farm-to-table ingredients, affordable prices. I wanted to create a place where everyone feels welcome regardless of how much money they have. The restaurant opened 4 months ago in downtown New Orleans, in a renovated historic building with exposed brick walls and warm lighting. The reviews have been overwhelmingly positive. Not because I'm wealthy, but because the food is genuinely excellent and the atmosphere is genuinely welcoming. I work there every day. I greet guests, manage operations, and sometimes cook alongside my executive chef when the kitchen gets busy. This restaurant is not just an investment. It is my purpose. Something I built with my own vision and effort. We are already planning a second location in Houston next year. The inheritance gave me the freedom to pursue this dream. But the success comes from my own work. That distinction matters to me. I am not living off my father's money. I am creating my own legacy while honoring his. Speaking of new beginnings, there is someone I need to tell you about. His name is James Thornton. He is 34 years old, and he works as a pediatric physical therapist. He helps children recover from injuries and illnesses, teaching them to walk again, to move again, to live again. He makes a modest income compared to my inheritance, but he loves his work with a passion that is beautiful to witness. We met at the soft opening of Sunshine Kitchen. He came as a guest, and I was working the front of house. He did not know I owned the restaurant. He thought I was just another employee. He complimented the food, asked questions about the menu, and seemed genuinely interested in the concept. When he asked me to dinner, I laughed and told him I owned the place. His response was perfect. "Then let me take you somewhere else," he said with a shy smile. Our relationship has developed slowly. We are both cautious. Both have been hurt before. He knows about Brandon, about the manipulation, about the years I spent being controlled. He never pushes me about finances or the future. He just enjoys spending time with me. When I finally told him about my inheritance months into our relationship, he just shrugged. "That is your money," he said. "I care about you." That was the moment I knew he was different. Grandmother Eleanor met him last month. She watched us together during a family dinner, saw how he looked at me, how he listened when I spoke, how he made me laugh. Afterward, she pulled me aside. "That boy looks at you the way your father looked at you when you were born," she said. "Like you are the most precious thing in the world. I am not rushing into marriage this time." I learned my lesson about that. But for the first time in years, I am allowing myself to hope. To believe that love can be genuine, that partnership can be equal, that I deserve someone who sees me for who I am. As for Gerald and Brandon, their stories have ended very differently than they planned. Gerald pleaded guilty to multiple charges and was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. He will be 78 when he is released if he survives that long. His assets were seized, his reputation destroyed, his second marriage ended. He will spend his final years behind bars knowing that the fortune he spent 2 decades chasing was never his to take. Brandon also pleaded guilty, accepting a deal of 8 years in exchange for full cooperation. His testimony confirmed every detail of the conspiracy and helped prosecutors build cases against 2 corrupt lawyers who had assisted them over the years. His real estate company collapsed, his investors lost millions, and his name became synonymous with fraud in Dallas business circles. The prenup I signed was voided due to fraud in the inducement. Technically, I was entitled to half of Brandon's assets in the divorce, but he had nothing left. Every penny was seized or owed to victims. It does not matter. I have more than I will ever need. And watching them fall was never about the money anyway. It was about justice. It was about proving that they could not get away with treating me like I was worthless. They spent years trying to steal my father's legacy. Instead, they lost everything. If you are still watching, I want to share some of the lessons this journey has taught me. The people who try to use you often tell you exactly who they are. Brandon asked about my father's money on our 3rd date. Gerald asked about special cards when I was 8 years old. I ignored the warning signs because I wanted to believe in good intentions. Now I trust actions, not words. Your worth is not determined by what you have. When I had $300, I was still Sophia. When I had $96 million, I was still Sophia. Money changes circumstances, not character. The people who loved me for money never loved me at all. The people who love me now would love me with nothing. Family is not always blood, but sometimes blood comes through when you need it most. My mother chose bitterness over love. Gerald chose greed over humanity. But my grandmother chose to never stop hoping. My uncle chose to welcome me without hesitation. Family can hurt you or heal you. Choose wisely who you call family. Forgiveness is freedom, but it takes time. I am working on forgiving my mother. Some days are easier than others. I do not need to forgive Gerald or Brandon. They face their own justice. But releasing hatred does not mean excusing harm. It means refusing to carry their poison anymore. And finally, the most important lesson of all. My father loved me in ways I am still discovering. He planned for my future when he knew he would not see it. He protected me from beyond the grave. That kind of love does not die. It waits. And when I finally found it, everything changed. I am sitting on the porch of my home as I finish telling you this story. The evening air is soft and warm, carrying the scent of jasmine from my garden. James is inside cooking dinner because he insists I should rest after a long day at the restaurant. In my pocket, I carry my father's letter folded and worn from how many times I have read it. 1 year ago, I was worthless in everyone's eyes. My husband threw me away, convinced I had nothing to offer. I walked into that bank, broke, desperate, and alone. I walked out wealthy beyond measure. But not because of the money. I walked out knowing my father loved me enough to plan for this moment. Knowing I come from strength, from vision, from unconditional love. Knowing that the people who tried to destroy me ultimately destroyed themselves. Brandon wanted to take everything from me. Instead, he set me free to discover everything I always had. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happens. And sometimes the people who throw you away are throwing away their own futures. My father called me his sunshine girl. He said I was his golden ticket to happiness. Now I understand that he was mine too. Sunshine does not stop shining because someone closes the curtains. It just waits until someone opens the window. And when they do, it fills the room with light. If this story resonated with you, I would love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was using you? Have you ever found unexpected strength in your darkest moment? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who is going through something similar. If you enjoyed this journey, please give this video a like. It helps more people find these stories of resilience and justice. And if you want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Finally, if you know someone who needs to hear that their worth is not determined by how others treat them, please share this video with them. Sometimes a story can change a life. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for being part of this community. I hope wherever you are, whatever you are facing, you remember that you are stronger than you know, and that sometimes the greatest blessings are hiding in the places we least expect. Take care of yourselves. I will see you in the next story.